Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Julie's Orchids. Today we're going to discuss the care of Phragmipedium Schroederae. So do stick around, because the Phragmipedium genre is an absolutely fabulous genre for newbie or beginner orchid growers. And I'll go over that more in just a little bit. Stick around.
Well, welcome back, guys. As I mentioned, this is a Phragmipedium, and Phragmipediums are my favorite genre of orchid, full stop. Phragmipediums are a form of South American slipper orchid. They can be found through the Amazons in Brazil. And one thing I really like about Phragmipediums is that as compared to epiphytic orchids, Phragmipediums are terrestrials, and they're quite an easy orchid for beginners, particularly for those beginners that are a bit on the heavy watering side of plant parenting, otherwise known as helicopter plant parents. So if you are a good plant parent and you're doing good with tropical plants such as monsteras and the whatnot, and you want to get into orchids, go for a Phragmipedium. They give you big, beautiful flowers, and you already know how to take care of them. So we'll go a bit more into that and why I'm not showing you the beautiful flower. Instead, I'm showing you the beautiful green strappy leaves. Now, one thing I do really like about Phragmipediums as compared to some other orchids is that frags are, as I mentioned, fairly easy to take care of. With the exception of a few, particularly Bessier crosses, and the Bessier crosses tend to be climbers. But for the most part, they grow pretty well in pots. They're really good for people that are heavy waterers and like to do a lot of watering of their plants. And they do pretty good in indoor growing conditions. So I'm going to kind of go over how I take care of all of my frags, and this one in particular, and I have no problem getting my frags to bloom. But yeah, frags are very big, bold plants, most of them. Some can be small, but most of them are very big plants, so you have to keep that in mind. You need a lot of space for them. They start out small and they get huge, and I'm sure you've seen some of my other Phragmipediums that are just massive, and the flower spikes on my biggest Phragmipediums get to be a good 3.5, 4 foot tall. So this one here is a medium-sized Phragmipedium. Okay, so Phragmipedium Schroederae, this is a primary hybrid, and Phragmipedium Schroederae is a cross between species Caudatum and Sedinii. I'm sorry, it's not a primary hybrid because Sedinii is a primary hybrid. So this is Caudatum by, let me look up what is Sedinii. Hang on. Okay, so Phragmipedium Schroederae has got 3 species in it. It has Phragmipedium Caudatum and Longifolium and Schlimnii. And it really is going to be a big plant. Longifolium is really known for big, huge, strappy leaves. With there being 3 hybrids, what I would suggest for Phragmipediums is get to know what's in your Phragmipedium. A few of the frags require pretty cold temperatures, but for the most part, most of your Phragmipediums you're going to buy can really tolerate, if you're happy indoors, they're happy indoors. So they're really good indoor beginner growing orchids because they like to be kept moist and they like general same temperatures that you do. Lighting. How do I do the lighting on these guys? So I do grow all of my plants underneath LED grow lights, and I kind of judge plant spacing on how high I need the lights to be. Is there room for their flower spikes in them? Not all plants you're going to be able to leave with their flower spikes going because some of them get very tall flower spikes. As I mentioned, some of my other frags that have longifolium in them get flower spikes that are 3 to 4 feet tall. And obviously, I don't have shelves that have that much height between the layers. So they do pretty good with a indirect bright light. So when I have these sitting on my shelves, I will sort of get the light to where I think a good height away from their foliage, not to burn them. And then I'll leave it sitting there for an hour or two, and I'll go back and I'll just feel the top parts of the leaves that are closest to the light. And if I feel they're getting warm, then I'll raise the light, the shelf up a bit. Now, I buy the IKEA Ivar shelves for that reason, in that they have areas that you can adjust the height between your shelves. And that's why I get the Ivar shelves, because I can adjust the height. But with these ones here, I give them almost the same amount of light as I give my cattleyas as far as distance from leaves. But yeah, I put them in there underneath the shelf, underneath the light that they're going to be underneath. And after about an hour, I'll go in and I'll just feel the leaves. And if the leaves feel hot or warm, then I'm going to raise the shelf up another inch or so, or whatever IKEA Ivar shelves allow you to adjust. Now, my Phragmipediums, along with the rest of my plants, are grown underneath full spectrum white light LED grow lights. You can grow them underneath compact fluorescents. I did have some of those. They grow just fine. I do think they bloom a little bit better with the actual LED grow lights and all, the full white spectrum. So if you're going to get lights, invest a little bit more, because they're not that much more expensive than the compact fluorescents anymore in the full spectrum grow lights. You'll notice a difference in the blooms. Now we're going to give the plant a little bit of a turn, because Phragmipediums are podials, so they'll grow sort of on a rhizome with new fan and new fan and new fan, as opposed to monoiopodials, which just keep growing up and up and up. So they will lose older fans, and you can see that's what we've got going on back here with this bit of discoloration on this older fan to the back. This doesn't have me worried at all, because I know that these plants do that. But I've got a new fan growing here, and this one will probably put out another new growth after it's done flowering. Now, how do you feed Phragmipediums? Well, how do you feed Phragmipediums? A very little bit, not often. I do feed my plants with, RO water, and I give them nutrients. But Phragmipediums are pretty good, because if you give them too much of a good thing, they'll get leaf tip burn. And you can see that that's what we've got going on here. I gave it too much, and it protested and did that. So with the next growth, I dialed down the amount that I was giving it, and have got nothing. So this plant here, even with the size that it is, it really only gets fed once a season, and it gets fed such ridiculously low levels of everything, you could almost consider it homeopathy. And by that I mean, it'll maybe get a total of 120 parts per million of a combined calcium, magnesium, full complement fertilizer with NPK and trace elements, maybe 120 once a growing season. That's it. That's all they need. They don't need a lot else. They do like the soil a little bit acidic. So when I potted these one up from bark into pumice, I was not super pedantic about getting all the bark pieces off. I wanted to leave some of the bark pieces on so that they could go bad and cause a little bit of acidity into the soil. Why did I do that? Because frags kind of grow on the ground where things sort of rot, and they're a bit acidic. So I give it a little bit of acidity by the old existing roots that had already had bark stuck to them. I haven't added any more. I'm not going to add any more. Other than that, whatever climate is going on in the pot is what the pot's going to have until the plant outgrows the pot. Now, I have had one of my Phragmipediums grow so many roots that it cracked this kind of pot. I'm a bit worried about this one because we'll zoom right on in here to this pot here. And as you can see, there's very extensive roots growing all over this pot, and there's new root tips growing. This pot's really pretty full of roots. Phragmipediums don't mind a repotting. They don't mind it at all. They don't mind going from one media to another media. They don't mind it at all. As a matter of fact, I find that every time I repot a Phragmipedium, it kind of kicks them into going, oh, I need to grow some more roots, and they tend to grow some more roots. So don't be shy on repotting your Phragmipedium. You know, if your Phragmipedium is in flower, wait till it's no longer in flower and pot it up. But if you've got a big, huge Phragmipedium like some of mine, my Belle Royale, that was in flower spike for 5.5 months straight and it needs a repot it. It'll be fine. You might break the flower spike because they're 3.5 feet long, but you don't have to worry about setting the plant back or anything of that nature. Once you have a good established big plant or even a medium-sized plant, you take it out of its pot, you put it into a different pot, it goes out in your home, and my experience is they put down a lot of new roots pretty quickly. So don't be shy on repotting it. Now, what do I have this potted up in? What do I have it potted up in? Well, I have everything in my collection with the exception of a few choice Western Australian or Eastern Australian terrestrial orchids. All the rest of my orchids are planted in pumice. Why do I do that? Well, for lots of different reasons. And yes, I do plant epiphytes in pumice for exactly the opposite reasons that I use pumice to plant frags in, and for kind of the same reason. But I do a different mix of pumice. So this is a pretty mature Phragmipedium, and it's got pretty fat honking roots. I don't know. You can see how big they are. They're pretty big, thick roots on this Phragmipedium. So I have it planted in a mixture of my 2 to 7 millimeter size pumice and the 7 to 20 millimeter size pumice, with a bit more of the smaller pumice than the larger pumice. And to help mitigate having a dry top layer, I've got a pretty good layer of just rocks, non-porous rocks on the top. And that seems to be pretty happy. And I do want you to get a nice top layer to prevent any dryness of the top layer, because Phragmipedium roots do not like to get dry or exposed to air. If they are dry and exposed to air, they will abort and die, particularly when they're first coming out of the plant. So you can see I've got a little pile of rocks and media piled up around the base of the plant here. That's where the new roots are going to come out, and that way those roots will not be exposed to air and will make it down into the pot and continue growing. So when you're potting up your frag, you don't cover the top of the, like, where the leaf joint is here, but you do want to get your media sort of piled up high enough around the base that where you think the root nubbins are going to come out will be covered. Likewise, you also want to have Phragmipediums in fairly deep pots. I could probably go for, if I could find one this depth, this width, but maybe that deep, I'd like it a bit better, because their roots are pretty firm and they tend to grow out to the side of the pot and then they'll kind of grow down. And sometimes you get lucky and they'll circle the bottom of the pot, but sometimes they just kind of lift the whole thing up and out of the pot. So one of my Phragmipedium sedeniis just grew so many roots circling around the pot that it cracked. It actually cracked the pot. And I'm going to have to repot that one, but I need a bigger pot. This one is probably going to need a repotting just because the roots really like this pumice setup. Now, I do have 2 strips about that thick by about, I don't know, 6 inches long, microfiber cleaning cloths snaked through the pot to make sure that there's even moisture throughout all layers. Now we'll come up here to the flowers. And as you can see, I've already lost a flower. And I'm going to cut off to a little video I recorded before I brought everything out to the table. And we'll kind of go over what happens to frag flowers because they're interesting.
Okay, one thing Phragmipediums are known for that other orchids are not so much known for is the Phragmipedium flower will not kind of fade on the flower spike. It'll just fall off, as you can see here with this one. You got a flower face down on the floor, because Phragmipediums, when their flowers are done, they fall off. And Happy will have a look at that. Nah, sometimes she takes them and runs off. All right. Yeah, so if you have a Phragmipedium and it has a flower and you come out and all of a sudden the flower's on the floor and it freaks you out, don't freak out. They do that. They just drop their whole flower. Plop.
Okay, so that's how I care for Phragmipedium Schroederae. Just look at this beautiful flower. It's really hard to get the lighting good on this one. How deep those colors are in that beautiful flower. All right, guys. If you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. A subscribe would be great. And everybody, thank you again for watching, and have a fabulous day.